The presentation. Okay, hello everyone, my name is Victoria.
I'm Ashin.
Hi, I'm Udit.
I'm Barnes.
I'm Thomas.
And today we're going to talk about Scandinavian Airlines and Ryanair. So first of all, we're going to introduce you to both of the airlines, to Scandinavian Airlines and Ryanair. And then we're going to answer the question given to us in the case study. So first of all, we're going to talk about the regulatory changes made in the early 90s, then about the other factors influencing the performance of SAS and Ryanair, and then about the future regulation, and then we will sum up our presentation in a short conclusion. So first of all, let's look at Scandinavian Airlines. So they were formed in 1946 in Stockholm. They are a flag carrier of Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. But flag carrier means that they are owned by, they are mostly governmentally owned. In 2004, it was 50%, but Sweden and Norway decided to gradually decrease this percentage. So in 2016, it's just 43%. But what's most important for you to remember is that it's a full-service carrier. So what actually means a full-service carrier? So first of all, they operate they have their hubs in the country capitals. So hubs are airports in which the passenger traffic is mostly concentrated, and they're connected to spokes. So for example, hub for SAS is Copenhagen, Stockholm, and Oslo, and a spoke is, for example, a city like Rome. Next things, they're really expensive, so the prices vary from 300 to 600 pounds. So they're really expensive compared to, for example, Ryanair. They have fewer seats, and they, as you can see on the picture here and here, in past you could even sleep on the planes. For me, this looks more like a restaurant or a hotel lobby than an aircraft. So this is the difference. And also they provide like luxurious in-flight services, for example, free alcohol, free food, sometimes really varied food, and also free baggage transfer.
Now I'll introduce Ryanair to you all. In 2016, Ryanair was the largest European airline by scheduled passengers flown and carried more international passengers than any other airline. It's the pioneer behind Ryanair's success is its current CEO, Michael Kevin O'Leary. So, what makes Ryanair so successful? Well, according to Michael O'Leary, and I quote, "We decided to follow the kind of low fares formula that Southwest Airlines had formulated in the US. And the other airlines are asking how they can put up fares. We are asking how we could get rid of them. So basically, they just want to reduce the cost, trying to cut all the essential services or luxurious services. They're just keeping the basic ones like seats with no recline, or maybe advertisements and no in-flight entertainment, no free food, complimentary, you have to buy your own food. So these are the small things that they have focused on to cut their costs. Now we have a short video on Ryanair.
On the fares that airlines pay to the airports. Landing at Brussels Central Airport is costly, but 60 kilometers south there is Charleroi Airport, which offers way lower landing fees. Simply by choosing to fly to that airport, Ryanair, they saved a fortune. Another cost-saving policy was utilising the same airplane model for all of the routes, and this airplane, it was the Boeing 737. Other companies like Lufthansa, they worked with over 14 different types of airplanes. This means they needed 14 maintenance technicians, each of them specialised on a different model of aircraft. Ryanair, instead, they could do the same with just a few experts. This means that while Lufthansa needed hours between flights to do maintenance checks, Ryanair needed half that time. And of course, add to this the rest of the extra costs that they saved during the flights. Do you want to eat on the airplane? Well, that's extra. Do you want to carry on more baggage? Yep, that's extra too. Want to choose your seats?
That's extra too.
Every year, Ryanair finds new ways to reduce costs. For instance, a few years ago on the backs of their seats, they started posting adverts. But the real turning point in this company came in the year 2000. This was the time when Michael O'Leary made a decision that changed the entire industry forever.
The travel agents. Take the f***ers out and shoot them. What
what have they done for passengers over the last years?
In the year 2000, Ryanair was the first company to create a website where you could book tickets online. Prior to that, it was impossible to buy your own plane ticket unless you lived close to the airport. So travel agents, they were a pretty essential middleman. And of course, these travel agents, they charged commissions, and these commissions went up to 30%. Now, instead, passengers could just go to the website, find the cheapest flight, and then buy it. Today, this is completely normal, but back then, it was a revolution, and it put lots of travel agents out of business. With all of the landing cop.
So now we're going to explain how the regulatory changes serves to transform the prospects of SAS and Ryanair. So the first deregulation actually occurred in 1978 in the USA, and this was a turning point for the industry. It led to the expansion of the airline industry from more centralised monopolies to a monopolistic market. And literally businesses saw this new opportunity and set up businesses overnight to take expansion of the new market, with Ryanair just being created 6 years later. So what happened before the deregulation in Europe? So before, in Europe, it was very nationalised. Governments mainly owned the airline industries. They strongly regulated them. The fares were decided by the government, and the government would give them subsidies and even cut their operating losses for them. So why does this deregulation actually occur? Why did it happen? So there was initial increases in tourism, trade and globalisation, and many people were trying to push for deregulation in the airline industry so you could take advantage of these and exploit the new markets. As a result of the deregulation initially in the USA, there was 39% increase in employees, an increase in efficiency as a result of the hub system, and a general increase in air traffic. And Europe saw that they needed to change to try and exploit the new changing world. So there were 4 main deregulation within Europe. The first one in 1987 basically meant there were lower fares, so price competition between airlines could occur. And this was a great time for Ryanair, as they'd set up just 3 years before, so this really meant that they could exploit this new strategy of low fares. Not only this, the initial set of unlimited airlines occurred. In 1990, there was a real stamp of approval on these lower fares from the double disapproval. In 1992, there was health and safety regulation, so all aircraft had to be licensed. This was just to maintain, because they were no longer regulated by the government. And in 1993 to 1997, all routes in Europe were now available. So what were the effects of this? So the competitive pros of this was that many consumers obviously benefited from the lower prices to their air travel. They can now travel wherever on lower costs. There's an increase in consumer welfare as a result of more choice, more businesses to choose from. There were innovations in the industry, as they were now trying to compete, the airlines were trying to compete against each other on better quality seating, better food, in-flight entertainment, and generally increasing globalisation and connectivity. However, there were some cons, so especially for SAS. So they lost sales, revenue and profit, as they could not compete with the low price Ryanair and EasyJet. So that many businesses fell out of the market as a result. Also, the quality in some airlines decreased. So Ryanair's no frills is a real key example of this, and their recent cancellations of many thousands of flights for getting their holiday rotas wrong is a clear example of this. And obviously environmental damage and climate change as a result of greenhouse gases.
Well, the rise of Ryanair. So the most immediate and salient effect of Brussels' liberalizing decrees has been the formation of numerous new air carriers. Ireland's Ryanair has taken aim of some of the routes on which the bloated Aer Lingus formerly enjoyed a natural monopoly, and in the process has become the most successful airline in Europe in its class. Well, Ryanair started benefiting from all the deregulations and continued their low-cost model.
So now let's look at more details how it affected Scandinavian airlines in the regulation. So first of all, they had more new competition. By more competition, I mean, as we said, airlines were literally appearing overnight, and by new competition, I mean this low-cost airline, which we mentioned before. So in response to that, they decided to form Enjoy a Star Alliance, and the main objective of the alliance is to improve the quality of their service and reduce costs. So SAS decided to change their strategies to improve even more the quality by, for example, being the most punctual airline in the whole Europe, and reduce costs by, for example, increasing the amount of work for the pilots from 7.5 hours to 9 hours. So the next question is, what other factors, aside from the regulation, can explain the relative performance of Ryanair and SAS over the 10 past years? So to answer this question, we decided to prepare something called SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But We will focus on the one we found the most important because we don't have time to mention them all, obviously, so we just mentioned some of them. So first of all, let's look at strength of Scandinavian airlines. First of all, they are the biggest carrier in the Norway. They have the biggest passenger share. Biggest passenger share is Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, and the second biggest in Finland. Second of all, they're really good at targeting the niche market. For example, they're targeting people who highly value the way they travel. They have really high standards because, as I mentioned. And also, as I found a really interesting fact, in 2011 there was the first LGBT couple marry in Sky in one of the SAS airplanes. So they're trying to show that they are also LGBT friendly. Also, the other strengths are punctuality. There was the second most punctual airline in 2013, and the flight safety, which they are constantly improving. Now let's move to weaknesses. We can see that they have the highest average cost when it comes to the whole Europe. You can see they're here, so they're on the very, very top. And in 2012, they were nearly bankrupt because of that, and they decided to impose some kind of plan. We will talk about next slide. The other weakness is the ownership structure. So it's mostly governmentally owned. So when it comes to decision making, the decision making is really slow. It takes much time for example, when there's some current problem, it takes a lot of time because all the governments must agree on the plan and all the others' ownership. So it takes a lot of time. And the last weakness is there is not enough social presence, which I know from my own experience because when I was doing my research, I got multiple adverts from Ryanair and not a single from SAS. So it shows that they not really invest much in social media. And the opportunities are, for example, the for excellence next generation plan, which the main point is cost reduction. So, for example, by cutting headcounts, by reducing headcounts, by making new payment schemes, and also by outsourcing. So, outsourcing mainly of the ground handling, call centers, and IT reconstruction.
Well, now I'll introduce the strengths of Ryanair to you. One of the most prized assets of Ryanair, its key strength is its CEO Michael O'Leary. Well, for 23 years as his chief executive tenure, he has lived up by the motto that there is nothing like bad publicity. He once joked that the Ryanair pilots would engineer a bit of turbulence in order to boost drink sales. So he said this to an interviewer that he doesn't give a shit about what people tell him, if people like him or not. So he's a thorough businessman by every means, and he doesn't really let himself get affected by the media, and he's always working hard on improving the reducing costs. All his interaction with the media, he is always focused on reducing costs. Then the weaknesses. Now, on the contrary, we have Ryanair, where there is a waiting time between the departure and the arrival. So whenever the time between those things, the departure basically. So to reduce time between flight departures, there have been allegations that Ryanair has not been following protocol regarding safety, security, and hygiene. Those disabled passengers who require wheelchairs for transportation from the terminal to the aircraft, Ryanair forces them to pay. It's not a free service, it's a paid service. And the amount is close to £50, or in euros, I think it is 55 or 60 euros. So that is a huge amount in comparison to the ticket price. And then Ryanair took no responsibility for delayed or cancelled flights. And if for any reason a passenger had to cancel his or her journey, they should not expect to have the fare refunded. If we look into the external environment, the threats that Ryanair might face is the recent cancellation and ruckus cost has led to huge amounts of losses due to compensation payments, compensation to pilots, and revenue loss. There are other types of losses also which I haven't mentioned actually, but they may be there are chances of legal fines they may have to pay to the Civil Aviation Authority of UK because there might be a suit against them. Then the punctuality has also decreased by over 10% since the flight cancellation ruckus began due to air traffic control, the weather because the fog is going to increase in the north side of Europe, and significantly a shortage of crew.
So what other features of the regulatory environment can be expected? We've already seen a large amount of changes in both the American and European airline industries since the 1980s, but there are more to come in a global economy where the needs of customers are constantly evolving. This is especially true in the case of the European Union, who wants to become a leading player in international aviation. We can see this through the EU's new aviation strategy, a plan started in 2015 that aims to make European aviation more competitive and fair, and to simplify existing regulations. The aim of this is to make air travel more affordable for customers, as well as reinforce the EU's global leadership position. The Single European Sky project is an example of the advancements made. It consists in a reorganization of the European airspace to make it more efficient. The second example of further deregulation inside the European airspace is the EU-US Open Skies Agreement. This agreement allows any European or American airline to fly in between the United States and the European Union. And it opens the door to transatlantic flights for European companies such as Ryanair.
There are many other features of the regulatory environment that may affect the aviation industry. One of them being the Kyoto Protocol Agreement. The Kyoto Protocol was the first agreement with over 44 nations agreeing to lower their CO2 emissions by a large amount. So far, the aviation emissions haven't been incorporated into the Kyoto Protocol, but sooner or later, all the aviations will have to account for their emissions. The UK has a goal to decrease their CO2 emissions by 60% by the end of 2050. Industrial emissions alone can be cut only to a certain point. And so for the aviation emissions to cut down as well, they would have to find new biofuel resources, which would let out a lot less of emissions, or they would have to cut down on the frequency of flights. Now this could affect the fares, which would increase the fares of flights, or the flight tax. Another one would be the European Union Emissions Trading Scheme. The ETS is the world's largest scheme for trading greenhouse gas emissions allowances. Unlike the Kyoto Protocol, this one actually incorporates the aviation emissions in it. Under this, airlines will have to monitor and report their emissions and trade their emission allowances. ETS ensures cost of carbon emissions proportional to the fuel consumption per passenger kilometer. The final one would be the future airspace strategy. Sustainable growth for an aviation industry could only be possible when there's proper management of the airspace, and there's amount of airspace available and improving the way of air traffic management. The scheme aims at modernizing UK airspace and creating advancements in air traffic management. Advancements in ATM can generate significantly commercial, environmental, and safety benefits such as fuel and time saving for the passengers as well as the aviation industry, and CO2 emission saving. So some of the future prospects which might affect Ryanair would be safety and health monitoring. We all know that Ryanair has had some problems with it wasn't able to monitor its safety or health regulations, and so this might cause a large problem in the future, as it might affect costs and performance in the future. The second one is the maturing market. The aviation market is rapidly maturing and will continue to do so. Low-cost airlines such as Ryanair will have to tweak some elements of their business model in order to encroach on markets that have so far been the preserve of legacy carriers. Ryanair has already dropped routes on low-margin secondary cities and started to fly major airports in an attempt to move up market. Increase in fuel prices. This is obviously one of the main points. Fuel is the principal operating expense for any airline industry. The past few years have seen considerable volatility in oil prices. Eventually, some of Ryanair's oil prices, they will have to get back at it with their customers, increasing their prices in order to compensate for the increased oil prices. For Ryanair to be able to deal with this, they will have to be very cost-effective, efficient, and effective. Due to this threat, Ryanair already has plans to manufacture 400 Chinese-built 200-seater airplanes, and this is trying to be as cost-effective as possible.
So after being saved from bankruptcy in 2012, SAS has managed to get back on its feet, and the company is now going towards complete privatization. Sweden and Norway recently reduced their shares in SAS, and Norway's Minister of Trade and Industry said there are no good reasons why the state should own an airline. So this change in ownership could potentially mean a change in strategy for the airline. Furthermore, SAS has expansion plans by creating an Irish subsidiary to fly shorter routes. This is their way. This would allow them to compete with low-cost airlines such as Ryanair and EasyJet. And finally, there are also consolidation plans within the European airline industry, which would mean that several airlines would fuse. One of the largest airlines in Europe, Lufthansa, their CEO said that consolidation in Europe is much needed and we want to be a part of it. And he talked about SAS being one of the targets of this consolidation.
So for a short conclusion and kind of like showing the recommendation for both of the airlines, I think that SAS should put more emphasis on the qualities they already have. So for example, that they provide this high quality of services, that they differentiate themselves from no-frill carriers. And also, in my opinion, they should also invest more time and be more like go more into future by investing more time and money into advertising in the internet. Because as I said before, I didn't find a single advertise from them. And the last point is that they should continue their thing about changing the ownership, because as we know, they're changing the ownership from stately owned to more privately owned, which is a good move because they will adapt to the current market, and also the decision making, as I said, will be more easier and more efficient.
To conclude, for Ryanair, they should continue to follow their extremely successful low-cost model and obviously invest more in research and development to find other ways to cut costs. They should obviously decrease the amount payable on extra luggage, wheelchairs, seating charges, etc. to increase customers. And the management should find ways to satisfy the needs and greed of those customers who dislike Ryanair, because there are a few consumers who follow these airline rating websites which consistently have ranked Ryanair quite low, almost last sometimes. That's all. So we would like to thank you, and we open for questions.
No.
Oh yeah, sorry.
First the crossword. Did you find the password for the crossword? It's actually the end of presentation, thank you, but now the crossword part. Did you find the answer for the crossword? What's the password? Anyone? Oh yeah. They're telling there. So this is the taxi company owned by Michael O'Leary, who is the ownership of Ryanair. What's interesting, this taxi company has only one taxi, which is owned by Michael O'Leary, which he uses to avoid traffic. So this is like an interesting fact at the end.
Yeah, he pays £4,000 just for the taxi license each year to avoid traffic.
Yeah. So thank you for your attention and time, and we are ready for questions.
Yeah, so first of all, has deregulation been beneficial to the industry overall, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. The creation of price competition is a huge plus for consumers. Any competition, innovations, but however, it's not going to be obviously good for SAS because they've lost sales, revenue, profit. But also many businesses which couldn't keep up with the competition have obviously dropped out of the market. So for them, no. But generally, with the changing world and globalization, I'd say greatly with an increase in trade. Definitely.
And the EU is constantly making new projects to continue this deregulation inside their airspace because it means lower costs and better for the customers as well.
Yeah.
Do you think the controversy that Ryanair has faced recently has affected the way that their customers see them, or do you think customers don't really care because their prices are so low?
The thing is, their prices are pretty low. Like, for example, I myself went on the Ryanair website to just search for a random trip to Ibiza, and I compared it with BA as well, British Airways. So there was, it was £90 on Ryanair and £160 on British Airways. So obviously, it's about 400,000 passengers are going to be affected because of the cancellations, which is like 20,000 flights between October to March. But when you're getting these kind of prices for a 2-hour trip, I don't think so it's going to affect. It's not going to get into the consumer's mind. But obviously, they'll be careful now that these flights are getting cancelled. So they might, whoever's flight has got cancelled, they might contact Ryanair and try to reschedule their plans or whatever. But I don't think so it's going to get into the consumer's mind.
I'd say people get more wary, definitely. People get a lot more wary of Ryanair, just in case. But for people like us, students, anything cheap, I don't think it would really affect. Like, if you want to go somewhere cheap, you're just going to go Ryanair, EasyJet, stuff like that. But definitely people will be a lot more wary.
And Ryanair is going to refund the fares what the people have paid if their flight has been cancelled or rescheduled and the consumer doesn't want to travel on those dates. So it's refunding only for this period because it's Ryanair's fault, not the consumers.
Do you think, because you said that SAS are like full service carrier and stuff, do you reckon they're going to go out of business because of these new deregulations and the cheap costs of the new flights to Ryanair?
So no, I don't think so because they kind of like, you know, they had this plan to like decrease the costs. So like, I mean, they have some.
I definitely say
Yeah.
they're in a niche market, so
Yeah.
people who want that are definitely going to stick with them. They're also already trying to get rid of the government intervention within them. So if they can do that successfully and go onto like a privatized airline, I don't see why they can't try and keep up with the and stay in business. But if they exploit their niche markets more, like and keep their high quality, I don't see why I could like keep them going. Anyone else? No? Yep.
Yeah, at one point you said the market is continuing to mature and evolve.
Yes.
How do you think that's going to do that in the future? What kind of picture is that going to
Okay, so the maturing market basically means increase in innovations, increase in ideas across the aviation industry. So basically for Ryanair, just hold on a second. Okay, they what they said is Ryanair will plan to tweak some of their elements basically to increase. Okay, so I'll give you an example. In the future, suppose let's say domestic airline and etc. A really international airplane carriers, such as they will be competing because the airports will also be in the future. Airports will also be expanding. Domestic airports, they'll initially, overall they will be expanding. So they will have international flights as well, and then so it will be a competition between the domestic flights and the low-cost flights such as Ryanair. And so because they will have competition with superior airlines, which are frill airlines, they will have to also like change their elements, some business elements regarding Ryanair.
Okay, is that it from the questions? All right, thank you very much, folks.